This year is Canada's 150th birthday, and that means you might be throwing a barbecue. But did you know that according to a new measure called the Party-CPI, the cost is up over 800% over the last 50 years? Now hold on, it might not be time to take back those invitations just yet. We have DePratto here from TD Economics to explain. Thanks for joining me.
Happy to be here.
So this isn't your usual type of report. What motivated you to write it?
That's right, normally we're talking about interest rates, but Canada Day is just around the corner. And we got thinking about, it's a time to reflect about the economy, your life, and where we're living. And as an economist, think, well, what can a Canada Day party tell us about the Canadian economy and how the trends have changed over the past 50 years?
So one of the things I want to ask you, you touch in your report on 3 party essentials. I'm going to start with my favorite one, the food. What are the biggest trends you're seeing at the grill right now?
One thing we noticed is Canadians still love their beef. We eat about 50 kilograms a year on average. That's about 2 pounds a week. That's a lot of meat. But that's actually fallen a little bit. So you go back to 1967 to Canada 100, people were eating about 66 kilograms, which again is really a lot of meat. And we've seen a bit of a shifting there towards other meats like chicken, but also vegetarian options are becoming much more popular. And there's a small but significant fraction of the population that does avoid eating meat.
Now, if it's a warm day and you're grabbing a burger, you're probably going to need a drink. So what are the biggest trends with beer or wine?
Well, one thing we've noticed, beer is still the most popular choice among Canadians. About 40% of our spending on alcoholic beverages last year went to beer, but that's actually down a bit. So you go back even just 10 years, and that was about 50 cents on the dollar going to beer. Coming in to sort of fill that void has been wine and spirits becoming much more popular. And this really reflects, I think, both the aging of the Canadian population and the fact that we are a little wealthier than we were in the past.
I think one of the things that was most interesting in your report is Canadians are often, made fun of about being big drinkers, but we're actually not even in the top 10. So your third and final point is around children's entertainment. What's happening there?
There's another big change. If you go back to 1967, the fertility rate in Canada was about 4. So that's 4 kids on average per family. Nowadays, that number is about 1.5. So a big change there. One way I like to think about it is, if you went out and sort of went to the government records and just picked 10 people to invite at random to your party, back in 1967 there would have been about a 1 in 3 chance that you'd have someone 14 or younger. Nowadays that's fallen by half. It's just a 1 in 6 chance that you'd find a kid at random in the Canadian population.
When we put those 3 things together, we look at food, we look at drinks, and then we look at children's entertainment, we come to this Party-CPI measure, which is up over 8 times since 1967. What is it, and what's the good news of this story?
Sure. Canadians, you may be familiar with the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, and this is Statistics Canada is trying to measure basically the cost of life in a really broad sense, average sense. And what we've done is try to recreate that, but look just at the components of a fun barbecue. So you've got your meat, you've got some non-meat alternatives, hot dogs, buns, condiments, juice, beer, wine, pop, dessert, the works for a nice afternoon barbecue. And we looked at how much that costs today. Which is on average in Toronto, it's obviously going to vary cross country, about $130. And then you go back to 1967, and that would have cost just $15.50 at that time. As you mentioned, there's a huge increase over the last 50 years. But the important thing and the real positive thing here is we also looked at that in terms of how much it costs as a slice of your wages. So back in 1967, the average worker, it would have cost them about 15% of their weekly wage. So, about a day's work after tax. Nowadays, it's actually 14% of the average wage. So again, about a day's work, give or take, but slightly lower, about a 9% decline there, really showing the prosperity that we are enjoying as Canadians, that sort of quality of life increase we've seen over the last 50 years.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.